Today's episode is going to be a bit different. One of the big challenges of running a podcast for a profession that's visual is figuring out how to make audio fit into the mix. One solution is to find universal topics that VFX artists can relate with and speak out to them. So today's episode is an experiment, one I borrowed from a friend of mine, Stephen Dubner. I say friend, but perhaps I mean someone I respect and admire. Books are amazing. They teach us so much about ourselves and the world around us. So naturally, their authors are incredible people too. After all, it takes a lot of willpower, grit, and determination to commit thousands of pages into a historical artifact like a book. But sometimes, when authors are trying to promote their books in interviews, the interviewer might not have read the book and end up asking surface-level questions that don't capture the breadth of its offerings. And then the author gets stuck ad-lib a summary of their work in just a few sentences. The whole process can be a bit unsatisfying. To help remedy these awkward moments, why not just share parts of the book in the episode itself? So, that's what you're getting today. A dose of what it means to experience imposter syndrome and how you might deal with that interesting phenomenon.
Hello, I'm Michel Gagné, and you are listening to the Real-Time Visual Effects Podcast, where wizards reside.
You have a gift. You have a passion for creation. There's something inside you that wants to express itself. And that something has led you to explore the world of visual effects, a place where magic happens, and the only limitation is your imagination. All the greatest artists in the world started somewhere, learning and growing into the people they are today. You being here is the first step to building your legacy as an artist. Learn from the best and brightest in the real-time visual effects community. Sharpen your skills and be your best self.
Here is your host, Travis McCallum.
Have you ever had a great idea that you immediately dismissed as too crazy, too expensive, too risky, too impossible? Look around you. We have driverless cars, the ability to talk to people via video for virtually free, and a million other inventions that would have seemed miraculous just a few years ago. The people behind those inventions had these ideas. They were not a different species. They were living, breathing humans like you. Instead of worrying that their ideas might not work, they were busy figuring out how they could.
That was an excerpt from the book Yes, You Are Good Enough, and Imposter Syndrome, Overthinking, and Perfectionism, and do what you want. What are some big ideas that you have had that you've been able to turn into reality?
That's a great question.
Speaking with me is author Trish Taylor, currently working as a career counselor for the last 14 years, first in England and now in Pensacola, Florida. Here's Trish again.
Initially thinking about that, the imposter syndrome immediately clicks in and I'm like, I don't have any big ideas. What are you talking about? Because that's what everybody does who worries maybe that they're not quite as good as they think they are. And that's why I'm really keen to talk to you about the idea that we compare ourselves immediately to someone else. So I have had some big ideas and I have had some interesting things that I've done. One of them was giving up everything that I've ever learned and ever done and moving to a new country, which was a big change because I didn't do it when I was a teenager or in my 20s. I did it when I was considerably older and gave up a whole life and began again. And sometimes when I'm having a day where I don't feel particularly accomplished, I remind myself that I started again. I started absolutely everything. So that's my starting point really is we have to kind of look at our life and recognize our achievements and not compare them to others, because my first initial response looking at that question is, well, what have I done?
Wow. That is a big move. And where'd you move from and to?
I lived in England. I lived in Yorkshire in England. I was happy. I had a good job, a hobby. I worked as a singer, which also paid me.
Oh, yeah. I forgot to mention, Trish is also a part-time jazz singer.
And one night I went dancing and danced with an American. So be careful who you dance with. That's my story. Because some salsa dancing, a fast-footed American might sweep you off your feet and then everything changes.
That's awesome, Trish. What are some things that can get in the way, preventing people from acting on their ideas? And how can they overcome them?
Most of us have an internal dialogue going that filters everything that comes in. If we're looking at mindset, we have to figure out, where did those thoughts and filters come from? So you might get a great idea. You might think, I'm going to create this amazing project. I'm going to write this book, or whatever it is you decide that you want to do. And immediately something pops into your mind and says, you can't do that. That's too dangerous, too scary, too risky. So for many of us, when that voice pops up, we stop. We just go, I can't do that. Why would I be able to do that? And what we have to do is, first of all, recognize where that voice comes from, because often it's a person who you've heard. Like, for example, my dad was not a risk taker. He had the same job from being 15 years old until he retired. He was terrified of risk. He wanted to provide for his family, and that meant staying in the same job, which wasn't a great job. He just didn't take a risk. And he had other friends who made a lot of money and were successful because they did take a risk, but he sat and was careful and cautious. So sometimes when I get a great idea, it's my dad's voice in my head. You don't want to do that. You want to just get a boring factory job, and that's safe, and that protects you, and that you're not going to ever have any risks. Where is that voice coming from that's telling you that you can't do it? That's a good first step. And then also look at what you have achieved and what you can do. And that I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later, about finding positives in your experience so you can start believing in yourself.
That's awesome. It sounds like we start with awareness, and then we kind of pivot into gratitude, and then move into these kind of like steps of these like phases, right? That's super cool.
Yeah, and I've got gratitude in my notes, because that is really important. And we'll come back to that, because if you're ever thinking you're not good enough, starting looking at what you have to be grateful for and all the things you've already achieved, which will be many. Every one of us have done something that somebody else probably hasn't done and didn't think they could do. Gratitude is definitely part of it.
Do you know what everyone calls you? Odd body. It made complete sense. That weekend, I had worn my faded jeans that were a little low slung, paired with a green cap sleeve t-shirt that was a shiny material and hugged my belly that hung a little over the jeans. Odd body. Yep, that summed me up. I was disgusting. I had kidded myself that I looked cool and that I fit in, when actually I looked gross.
Looking back at your childhood, do you still think you're gross today, Trish?
It's funny looking at that question and thinking, wow, I wrote those things. Of course I don't now. But then I say, why do I say, of course I don't? Yeah, I went through a lot of time believing that I wasn't good enough, that I was ugly, that I didn't measure up. Some of that stayed with me into adulthood, and I had to really work on it. Now I convince myself with positive affirmations. I was thinking about this story that a good few years ago now, I lived in this tiny apartment. I was newly divorced and I was feeling a little sad with my life. I lived in this apartment block, which people called it Heartbreak Hotel, because everybody who lived there was pretty much newly separated or divorced, and it was all tiny one-bedroom apartments. And I used to get in the elevator coming in from my salsa dancing, and I would be dressed up, and I would convince myself that I wasn't that gross child. And I used to look in the mirror of the elevator and say, you're bloody gorgeous, you are. And it sounds crazy now, but that was my affirmation to myself, convincing myself I am good enough and I can do this. And I wouldn't allow myself to believe the negative voices that every now and then were telling me, you see, you got divorced, you couldn't even get that right. You have to counter it with the positive stuff. And I just kept doing that until I believed it.
That's awesome, Trish. I love hearing about how much power is in seeing the world with a glass half full. It really is amazing. I know that we often have experience in our youth that shape our perception of ourselves. So how can we break that undesirable mental roadblock of our self-image? An example you gave was positive affirmations. Is there any other techniques?
One of the things that completely changed my life was I started doing some mindset work. I mean, I went so far down the line with that. I trained as a practitioner of mindset techniques and technologies. It's called neuro-linguistic programming. And there are some people out there who think this is all fake and fraud. But all I can tell you is it really works. And if you look at lots of positive people, that is what they're doing. And I was working with clients on the same kind of stuff. And what it's really about is looking at where your beliefs come from, kind of re-engineering them to fit how you want to feel. And so what you might do is look at a positive person and model that behavior. If we look at somebody who's really successful that you would like to be like, look at them and think, what do they do? Do they stand complaining about all the bad things that are happening in their life or all the things that are stopping them? Or do they look at what they can change? Do they work with themselves? And that's the power of your mind, is whatever you think about, you bring about. It's a cliche, but it's so true. You have to kind of look at people who you want to be like. And what are they doing? I think I use the example in my latest book about sports people. Imagine if they said, I'm never gonna be able to win this race. I'm never gonna be able to score that goal. I'm just not good enough. If they said those words every single day, those words would become the truth. So you have to build yourself up, look at where you've come from, look at the things you used to believe and switch that around. And there are a lot of actual techniques you can do. I do have a YouTube channel which has some of these techniques that can work with people kind of watching, but a lot of it is you can do it with a practitioner. You can actually even take yourself back and figure out where those beliefs come from. There are lots of techniques and therapies. I do one called mental emotional release, where we look at where a person's belief came from, and it's stored at an unconscious level. You don't always know what it is, and releasing that and letting it go and imagining yourself with a more positive future. I mean, there's a lot to unpick often. And I'm sure for a lot of people, traditional therapies are also useful. I'm totally for that if that's what people want to do. But not everyone maybe needs to do that or can do that. I finding a way to look at where did your beliefs come from? If you constantly have a voice in your head that said, I told you you'd never be good enough, I told you, then you have to let that one go. I'm just thinking I had somebody I knew who overheard things said about her as a child, that she wouldn't be good enough. And it was really only a conversation that was not really meant for her ears and was just a discussion around, could we afford to send her to college? That kind of thing. That I think I mentioned this, that parents probably have those conversations every day. Do we have $50,000 a year to set to, whatever it's going to cost it? And overhearing that made her believe that maybe she wasn't good enough. And by unpicking that and realizing that wasn't true, that was another one of those lies that she absorbed that continued to hold her back until she was able to say, of course I'm good enough. I've proved it in this way.
One of the things I often think about is when people kind of blanket say, oh, I'm an aspiring artist. And what they're really saying is, I wish I was something, but I'm not. Kind of how you alluded there, like you either are or you aren't. So if you're doing the craft of creating art, then you are an artist, and just embrace that. You don't have to be a professional getting paid to be considered a legitimate artist. And I think that's really powerful to understand.
Absolutely. We're all aspiring for some things, but we're all artists and we're all creative in our own way. And I think it's really easy to compare yourself to somebody. I have a friend who describes himself as the world's best portrait artist. And I remember when I first heard that, I was like, ooh, that's confident. But you know what? He makes that true every single day. He does portraits every single day, and he gets better and better and better. He says, I am a thriving artist, not a what do they call it? A starving artist. I'm a thriving artist. And I think that's it. We're all artists. And I know for the longest time, I would say, well, I'm kind of a writer, but I only wrote this book because, and I recently changed all my website and my domain name to be Trish Taylor Author. I am an author. I publish books, but because I've done it in my own way, I still look and compare myself to people with, $1 million deals. The bottom line is we're all creating something. We're all writing books. So we're not aspiring. We're creatives. We're writers. We're whatever we want to be. Because I guess in some way, when we say aspiring, we're putting a block on it. We're saying I'm trying. I'm not there yet. Whereas if you tell yourself, I am the world's greatest writer, I am the world's greatest visual effects creative, whatever it is, you start to tell yourself that, you believe it.
That's awesome,
Trish.
True. It's so awesome.
I watched a popular baking show that everyone was talking about. The sight of the incredible cakes and biscuits made my mouth water. When they explained the rules, I realized that I was not a baker in the same universe they were. It required them to make each item look exactly the same, perfectly uniform. When I bake my ginger snap cookies, they come in all shapes and sizes, and they always taste good.
Why is it so important to embrace our own unique identity and not try to replicate somebody else exactly?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And I mean, I guess that creativity is about creating, not copying, right?
That's certainly true. A quick Google search states creativity, noun, the use of the imagination or original ideas, especially in the production of artistic work.
I don't know if you've ever been to an art gallery where you see those people. I remember going to the Louvre in Paris, and there are people who stand there and they copy. They sit there with an easel and they copy the Mona Lisa. And I guess it's to understand the structure and everything like that. But if that's all they did for their whole life, they would just be a replicator, right? There wouldn't be an actual creative artist. And I think realizing that there is a place for you in your art and your creativity. There is somewhere circled on a map for you, as they say, that's not somebody else's. And if you try and be someone else, what about that gift that you've got, that creative talent that you've got that is so special for you and might just resonate with somebody that other one doesn't? This is kind of shifting slightly aside with this question. Realizing that you are not for everybody is a really powerful thing. I have got friends who would never read my books. They're not for them. They're not interested, and I don't want them to read them because they're not for them, right? There's TV shows that my husband absolutely loves and I have got no interest in, but there's another 50 million people who might like it. So do you think that the people who make a TV show that I don't like sit worrying that Trish Taylor didn't care about it? Creating something that's perfect for your audience and finding your niche is so important, because you are not that other person. You might create something that will turn some people off, but equally, somebody will absolutely love it. Finding what you're good at, I think, allows you to thrive and allows you to find your audience.
I am 100% guilty of being a people pleaser in my youth. I have always wanted people to like me, and you got to accept that there are some people that you're going to click with, and then there are others that you aren't. And it's okay. Understand that you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Coming back to gratitude, be willing to embrace and cherish the people that you do have in your life and that do like you for who you are, and that alone.
Right. And when you look at things like marketing, and I made so many mistakes because I tried to create something that everybody would want. When I started doing client work and coaching, and when the sort of big sin of marketing is to say, oh, I'm for everybody would love my product. And it's like, well, they wouldn't, and you're never going to find the right people if that's how you try and market yourself. And finally realizing that all those people out there are not right for you. And actually, you might even upset some of them by offering something. There are some people that believe that mindset stuff is all baloney and it's not good and it doesn't matter and you can't. But I'm not saying fake it till you make it. I'm saying believe in yourself first, because if you said to me, I've got this product, but it's really not very good, I'd be like, well, I don't want to buy it then. So if you can't at first start to believe in yourself and in what you create, how can you expect other people? And I think I went completely off the question there. But
good. So good. Circling back then, let's talk about the artist trying to recreate the Mona Lisa. What can we learn about ourselves by observing others and learning from their work?
Where's the benefit?
Where's the benefit in that? In spending time, looking at other people's successes and you had mentioned it earlier, where what are the practices that they're doing to stay focused and not complain about their work and stuff? I'm just curious, what are the lessons learned that we can think of, maybe from an artist perspective, or since your background's more in writing, when you're looking at other writers that are role models for you? I know in your book you had mentioned that somebody was a really great writer and you went to take one of their online classes and it wasn't really the same as their writing, but just kind of across the board.
Right. We can learn from people's mistakes as well as their successes. Going back to that idea of modeling, so breaking down a process of how a person does something, you'll often find people say, this is the method to success. This is the way to do it. And if you were building an engine and taking it apart and putting it back together again, there probably is one way that you can do it that will make it work perfectly. But when you're doing something creative, there is probably some steps that you can take. I mean, one of them would be working on your stuff regularly, believing in yourself and following a process and working on yourself regularly. However, let's say that some people write every day, or some people paint every day, but some people take days off. What can we learn from that? Does that work for everybody? Does that person who write every day, are they successful and are they the way you want to do it? Maybe you don't want to go in that direction. Maybe you have other things in your life. You see, in the question about how we can, you didn't say copy, but how kind of modeling other people, we have to take what's relevant in our life, because their life is not our life, right? That they have got, and I feel like I am kind of moving in a slightly different direction here, but there's a term called, in the NLP stuff I do, about the map is not the territory. So when we look at things, when we look at a visualization of something, that is not the real thing. So you have to also accept that when you look at someone else, you're not seeing the full picture. So for example, if I look at a really successful author who's making millions of dollars, what can I learn from that? Well, I can learn that they're a good storyteller, that they have a good editor, that they have a good cover, that they work really hard, they have a team behind them. But there might be things that they've done differently. They might already have had a massive speaking career. So I guess I'm saying don't completely compare yourself to other people, because their story is different to your story. I think you can definitely learn that everybody's got to work. I think the belief that there's an overnight success and that people just suddenly become successful simply because they were in the right place at the right time is completely wrong. I have a friend who I knew when I used to work in a music business, and he got an Oscar. And I don't know him very well now. He lives in another country. But I was so excited to see his name on credits. But he didn't get that overnight. He's been working for 30 years. Do you know what I mean? So what can we learn from it? These people are sticking with it. They're consistent. They keep focused and they keep working, and they don't kind of give up. I think that's another thing, knowing when to give up and knowing when to pivot. Because sometimes you're in the wrong thing. Sometimes what you're doing is not going to work for you. And it's kind of it's that balance between quitting something that's not working and staying with something that is only not working because you haven't given it your full attention. You haven't totally focused.
When I joined a training group to run that marathon, I was told that we were part of a small group, a tiny percentage of the population who would ever do it. When I struggled and wondered why I, as one of the slowest runners, should even bother, I reminded myself of that message. Even if I was slower than everyone in my group, I was still out there doing something that more than 99% of the population would never even try.
You mentioned the power of words can have a lasting effect on how we view ourselves. Can you tell me a little bit about the lies we tell ourselves and how we can reframe our mindset?
We mentioned earlier about words that we've heard other people tell us, words that people have said that we've absorbed into our unconscious, and they pop up. Let's say that you were going for a really major role and it was going to mean that you were going to be in the public eye and you were going to be hopefully very successful. A lie might come up that you have heard, or that somebody else has, that you have said to yourself, or that you've heard somebody say and you've absorbed and you may not even know. So the kind of things like, well, nobody in our family has ever done this. I mean, you may have heard those kind of things. I certainly have, well, none of our family ever did this. And, we don't do that. That's not the way we do things. Or you'll never be good enough because you didn't get a master's degree. Those are the kind of lies. And when we hear them, that's when we have to counter them. That's when we have to look at someone else successful and say, but she didn't get a master's degree and she did it. Because I consistently do that. I look at people and I say, oh, wow, people who write books, they have to have this, or they have to have done a master's in fine whatever and creative writing and all this kind of stuff. And then I have to remind myself, no, there are plenty of people out there writing screenplays. You've got bestsellers who are winning the Booker Prize, who don't necessarily have a background that you would automatically assume would make them a bestseller, a genius, whatever. So the lies that we tell ourselves, we've got to start listening to them and recognizing them. But I also should say, sometimes the lies that we tell ourselves are there to protect us. The unconscious mind is continually throwing up things to keep us safe. If you go for that big role, if you go to Hollywood, or if you, whatever, imagine something that feels almost too big for you, you might fail, you might get hurt, you might lose everything. And that's a risk, right? So sometimes the little things that pop up are to protect you, and you have to make that decision and say, I'm okay with that risk. I'm going to stop doing it. The lies come from various sources, and sometimes we have to think, who once said that in my life? You might have had an aunt or an uncle who came for dinner once a month and told you, you should get a job and you should stay in that job because that's the only thing that's safe in this world, and you should get a job for life. Or do you see what I mean? Those are lies because they're only true for some people. In fact, they're probably not true for anybody nowadays. So we need to recognize, where did they come from? And was that person, who was the messenger behind it? Because have you ever met someone who said to you, who are you? What are you doing that for? Get a proper job. Go get a normal job. Nobody's interested in that. That's just for rich kids, or that's just for this. Or we have to know who is the messenger, analyze and break down what the message is saying. Is it true? Is it useful? Is it helpful? Do I believe it? And can I just say, I dismiss this. I don't agree, and turn it around. Okay, tell me a lie that you think that you might have heard. Not about you, about anybody.
No, I'll go with the artist, classic one. Don't get a job as an artist. You're not going to make any money. Be a lawyer or a dentist or a doctor instead. We hear that all the time. Who's going to buy your art? At least for the digital side, that's changed because everything's gone digital and we need artists more than ever. And to be honest, a lot of jobs that exist in the market today are being taken over by automation and software robots. But robots cannot replicate art. Your skill set as an artist is always going to be in demand because nobody else can do it.
Right. So you answered part of the question we're always going to need artists. So I would turn that around and say, I could be a lawyer, or I could be a dentist. Maybe a dentist's lasting impression would, they leave somebody with nice teeth. But I could also be somebody who creates something that will be there long after I've gone, and I'm prepared to take that risk. I mean, I say to people now who are writing and creating and worrying about whether they're ever, going to do anything. Look at Netflix. They're running out of things because we're all absorbing so much creativity. It's the one thing that's kept us all from going crazy about while a lot of us have been in our homes. So look at the lie and turn it around. There's always going to be a place for dentists and lawyers and accountants, but there's also always going to be a place for writers. I always imagine that if the world turned to ashes, there'll still be books somewhere that I can pick up even if there's no electricity. You know what I mean? And I'll be able to look at that book. I still buy paper books because much as I love the digital world, I like the feel of a book and the smell of a book. So again, finding
and the texture too. I like the texture.
Yes, I'm kinesthetic, as they say. I like the feel of things. So just turning that lie around. And also one of the things I would say is, what would you say if somebody said it to you? was a friend. If you had a friend who you believed in and you believed in their art and they said, I'm never going to be any good, or the kind of lies you tell yourself, what if your friend was saying it? What would you tell them? You wouldn't say, yeah, you're right. You're useless. Give it up. Go become an accountant. You wouldn't, would you? I hope you wouldn't. You would encourage them. Treat yourself with as much love and care and compassion as you would for somebody who you love, because we are supposed to love ourselves, right?
Looking into the workplace, Trish, we often feel that we don't belong, that we aren't qualified, that imposter syndrome setting in where we're often underselling ourselves and focusing on the negative emotions of self-worth. So what is the secret to avoid being a Debbie Downer or a negative Nancy around your coworkers and just in the workplace as a whole?
Well, it kind of sounds corny and a cliche, but gratitude is one thing. Look at what you contribute. You can see it. You know what you do every day. And sometimes you might need to write a list of positives about the things that you contribute and that you do and that you are grateful for. And those positive affirmations, I mean, my husband thinks I'm crazy because I work mostly from home. And sometimes if he comes home early and I'm continuing to do what I do, he's like, do you just talk to yourself all day long? I was like, yeah, I do. Who else am I going to talk to? And I am constantly having conversations with myself saying, this is going to be okay. This is going to be good. This is great. I'm so glad that I got this done today, because the opposite is I start to say, I've achieved nothing today. You know, some days I get an hour of work done and then we call it, I faff around and procrastinate a little. Mm-hmm. But then I'd say, what have you done? But that hour of work achieved something that is going to change something in the world, even a small way. So if you're in the workplace, I mean, one of the things is it is difficult because often we're surrounded by negative people. I'm more worried about the other Debbie Downers than myself, because how you deal with them can be difficult. And I think it's allowing yourself to walk away and to not get sucked into debates and arguments and just to focus on what you're creating and stay focused. And I used to have a little sticker on my computer, and it said, what are you doing right now? What are you working on right now? And if it's faffing around on social media, then you need to get off and do some real work. And of course, once you have something like a sticker, after a while, you ignore it. You don't see it anymore. But something like that, affirmations on stickers, I put those around. If I lived on my own, they'd be everywhere. But then my husband really would think I was crazy. But, it's like stickers on saying, you are amazing. You have achieved this today. Sometimes I look in the mirror and remind myself, you wrote a bloody book. You wrote more than one book. You did. I quit drinking a few years ago. And if I have a really bad day, I go, you quit drinking. You didn't think you could do that. And you did. It's not, for some people, that's not a big deal. But for me, it was something that was important to me. So reminding yourself constantly of what you're good at, what you've achieved, what you will achieve, and saying positive affirmations. And affirmations sounds kind of, again, not everyone likes the word. It's just kind words to yourself.
I spent my birthday at a conference a few years ago, and at lunchtime I checked Facebook. No one had wished me happy birthday. I wondered if it was my birthday. Maybe I was mistaken. Later in the day, I checked again and still nothing. I finally discovered that I had made some changes in my privacy settings. If Facebook does not say it's your birthday, apparently it really isn't.
We are so connected with social media and the digital lifestyle today. What's your advice on managing your sanity when consuming media on the internet?
Oh, this is a good one. And I have a confession. 4 months ago, I quit Facebook, and I had to really think about it, because I had a business page and I had I wouldn't say a massive following, but I'd built it up over a few years. And it was one of the ways that I shared my books and shared quotes and told people that I was launching something new. I found myself being so sucked in and getting upset with, the stuff that you read, all the conspiracy theories and all the politics and all the stuff that negativity. And what would happen is I would go on my business page, and then I would start reading stuff, and I'd find I'd wasted time and I'd lost my positivity. And I kept telling myself, I need it. I have to have Facebook. I have to stay connected with it. And I also was working consulting with a company, and I was running their Facebook page. Sometimes things happen and we think they're bad and then they're good. That consulting work disappeared with all the stuff with COVID. So I lost that work. The company kind of downsized a little. And so I realized that I don't have to do their page anymore. What if I just took a month off? And so I decided to do that. And I was launching this book at the very same time. In some ways, it was a risk, but I'm not an author with a big publisher where anyone's going to tell me. And part of the book is about doing what you want and not what other people tell you to do. And I thought, in an ideal world, what would you do? And it's like, I would be away from Facebook. I would use maybe Instagram. I know it's owned by Facebook, but I don't get involved with things in the same way. It's more visual and prettier. I still use Twitter. I came off for a month, and after a month, I felt so good. I've not gone back. And this book has done better than any of my others. And I didn't use Facebook. I didn't do any Facebook ads. I used other methods. So it's kind of what we believe. We kind of tell ourselves, I have to do this way because everyone says, you got to have Facebook. And I think it's clearly a problem because I tweeted that I'd quit Facebook last week or the week before. And I tweet something and might get no responses. There was something like 3,000 responses to this tweet. All these people saying, well, I'd like to do it, but I can't, but I'm scared, but how did you do it? And I realized there are people who they're so tied in, they're terrified to let go of it. So I know that's not quite the answer you expected. We all need to be connected in the digital world. But what I would say is, if something isn't working for you, give it a try to let it go, because I don't get wound up with the same way on Twitter. I don't use Reddit in the same way. I don't find them as much of a time suck as Facebook was for me. And I've had to let go of seeing photographs of my family who are 5,000 miles away, friends who I don't have any other connections with. But I think if they are truly my friends, I can find other ways to connect, right? I shouldn't be relying on a platform to be connected with people who are supposed to be important in my life. There are other ways. And the other, I mentioned about NLP before, that whole mindset is, if something's not working for you, then try something else. Mm-hmm. And there is always another way. There is always a choice and there's always another way. So I would say, look at social media and think about how it makes you feel. And if it doesn't make you feel good, that's a lesson there. You listen to your unconscious mind telling you, this is not good for me right now. It might be you just need a break. But I would definitely say, people talk about give yourself, only do it for 15 minutes a day. I'm a little addictive on some things. So for me, that didn't work. I had to just completely go cold turkey on it. And I don't regret it at all. It's been really good for me.
For those trying to navigate their own personal brand and to get their art out to the masses, whether it be for a new job or just to connect with the community, what are some tips that you have in building your own personal brand?
And interestingly, again, imposter syndrome jumped straight into my mind, and it said, well, what do I know about branding? I don't, because we always have that little thing on our shoulder, in our ear. I can tell you that I have learned a lot of things about what not to do. And I think the main thing is stop trying to please everybody. You are not for everybody. Not everybody wants your stuff. And I think you're familiar with branding. People talk about the individual customer avatar and finding out who that person is who wants your stuff, thinking that they're all over there because we want all those people, when actually the reality is, for example, imposter syndrome. I thought originally that imposter syndrome was always people like me, but actually imposter syndrome is a lot of the people who are really struggling with not believing in themselves are highly educated and are highly accomplished. If you go on Reddit and look up the imposter syndrome subreddit, it's a lot of people who've got PhDs. They're the people who don't believe in themselves, ironically, the people who are doing it, who are amazing. So eventually I started to see that it's not just the people who maybe have started late, because I did start late with everything. Maybe it is the people who are 20 and 30 and who are starting out and who have got everything to show that they are really good and are definitely good enough, but still don't believe it. Maybe they need encouragement. So finding who your audience is and staying focused and not trying to be everything. And that other thing, I started out, I had Pinterest, I had Twitter, I had Instagram, I had every platform. And it's exhausting. You can't do all that stuff, So if you're going to do social media, find one or two and stick with it. Unless you've got a team of people who can do all that stuff for you, which most of us don't. Right? And be authentic. I think that's the key, really. Be authentic about who you are. Stop trying to pretend that you're somebody that you're not, and don't try and be somebody else or emulate them. You might go after their fans because they might also be your fans or your followers, but don't be them, because the difference between somebody who's similar to you and you is that you have got that secret sauce that they don't have. You will connect with somebody. I'll tell you a quick story. My husband works, and he used to be in the military, and now he works and he teaches, and he runs stuff outside of that. And he was very, I wouldn't say shy, but he worried about being good enough. And he took a lot of time to really work hard to know what he was doing. And he used to get anxious and nervous about, what was presenting information. What he found was that the people in his class who were like him connected with him because they needed somebody like him who would go the extra mile, who would be sympathetic and understanding of somebody who wasn't getting it straight away, because he'd been there and he'd felt concerned about maybe being not quite good enough, even though he was. The person who stands at the front of the class and is completely cocksure and confident, they might not connect with the person who comes in at the class and who's feeling nervous and anxious and needs that little bit of extra support. You're not for everybody, and everybody's not for you. So if you're the person who's a little bit reticent and is quiet and does things differently, there's somebody out there who needs you just as much of the more arrogant, confident, cocksure person. So just remember, you're for somebody. You're not for everybody. It's that whole cliche of find your tribe. Find your people.
That's awesome. And thank your husband for his service. It's a big honor and a privilege to be in the military. Okay, Trish, I am a big fan of concrete actions when it comes to overcoming obstacles in my life. So I know you've come up with this awesome 28-day plan to beat imposter syndrome. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about it to me.
Okay. Yeah. So
you don't gotta go through the whole thing. No. Definitely encourage people to jump into the book and see each step so you can follow it. But here's a little sneak peek, I guess.
Yeah. And just an FYI, I do have a freebie that just has the 28-day plan, because I realize not everybody wants the whole book. You see, I'm okay with not being it right for everybody. Not everybody wants the stories. Some people just want that plan. So I've summarized it and I've got a freebie of that, just that section of the book. It's still a couple of thousand words, so we can maybe connect and I'll send you a link to that. So what I was trying to think is what I always like with the self-help books I do, I always try to give people something practical that they can do. Because when you read something, you forget about it and you don't do it. The plan starts with recognizing who you are and your achievements. And I think that's really important. So if you're starting to believe that you're not good enough, write down all the things you've ever achieved, all the things that other people have told you that you're good at. And maybe ask a few people what they admire in you, people who you really trust. And I remember asking someone that I'd worked for after I'd left, I said, what did you value in what I did? And he said, execution. I thought, that's true. If I start something, I'll finish it. I'll get it done. I'm reliable. I execute. That's really important. So I know that if I'm going to do something, I'm going to get it done. The 28-day plan, I always say, you don't have to do all of them, but it's kind of useful. It's about building your confidence and believing in yourself. So do something. A couple of the things are about being bold in letting go. Do you do something that you really don't want to do? Are you part of a group, an activity? I've been part of groups that, to be honest, this whole lockdown thing has really helped me, because I've stopped doing some things and then I thought, I don't think I like doing that anyway. And now I'm free to say, I'm not going to do it anymore. Most people are going to recognize that if it's not right for you, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. Find something else to do with your time. Look at your activities. What do you spend your time doing? What do you spend your time doing for other people that you do it out of duty? There's nothing wrong with duty, but ultimately it's your life. So learn to live it the way you want to. Get a little bit selfish. A few people ask me, is this going to make me selfish? Like, yeah, a little bit, but that's okay, because I want you to find your best self. And when you start living the life you're supposed to live instead of the life that you live for other people, you're able to give more anyway. Figure out what you're good at, start dreaming. And I mentioned in the plan of sit down and imagine a time when you're really, really happy. Visualization is another one of my key things that I do with people. Imagine, what was it you were doing when you felt incredible and amazing? How does that make you feel? And how can you replicate that in part of your life? And if everything else is making you feel bad, that's kind of a barometer to tell you this isn't right. That unconscious mind thing we talk about, that is a little lesson of a little thing going, hey, this don't feel good. This is not right for you. Either that or this is risky and I'm going to protect you from doing it. So figure out what you love. Write a list of things that you want to achieve. Write a list of things that you have done already that you're good at. Look at transferable skills and start to believe in yourself, and do something for you. Do something fun for you. I never get the TV remote in this house, I'll tell you. I don't even know what's on TV. Every now and again, I grab it off him because I accept that he's outside the house all day. He comes home, he likes to relax, and that's his way of relaxing. TV is not my big passion, as it is that's what he enjoys doing when he wants to relax. But every now and again, I take it and I'm like, I am watching something that you're going to hate, and I'm going to watch it because that's what I want to do with my time today. Not that we don't have more than one TV, but find something you love and do that because you deserve it.
So does that mean I'm off the hook for washing the dishes?
Well, are they your dishes? I mean, if there's someone else who would do them.
It's a joint effort. She cooks, I clean.
We have that exact same thing. My husband thinks I'm a magician because I can cook, and I can throw things together fairly simply. It takes him longer to clean up my mess than he does my cooking. So I think that's a good deal.
One last question. You are a passionate singer of jazz. Is there a future to be in the opening act at the Super Bowl?
I don't think so. However, in the lesson of doing things you want to do, I am working on something, writing a melody and doing some on a song. It's not actual jazz, it's more pop stuff. Again, we're allowed to change our passions. When I came to the US, I was doing quite well in England with singing, and I was kind of making a bit of money, and I was enjoying it. But I've moved, my creativity has moved, and I will tell you, you are more likely to see me in a stand-up comedy club than you are singing, because that's something that I would like to explore in the future. People keep telling my books are funny. They're not supposed to be. That's obviously part of my kind of unconscious that comes out. So at some point, I'd like to do some comedy.
That's awesome, Trish. I really, really had an awesome time talking with you today. You are so amazing and talented.
Thank you.
I want to ask, as we kind of do close up here, do you have anything you want to promote, any closing thoughts, any big projects you're working on you want to share?
Sure. If anyone does want to find some techniques, although I'm kind of moving away from that and more focused on writing, I do have a YouTube channel, and that's YouTube Trish Taylor Coaching, youtube.com Trish Taylor Coaching.
I'll include that in the notes for the episode.
Thank you.
So.
And I'm currently working on all my work so far has been self-help books, but I'm currently working on a book which will be out in November, and it's for Americans who want to learn British. So if you like British TV, if you want to learn a bit of slang, if you want to know what the heck they're talking about on British TV, and it's a light-hearted, funny book. It's going to be illustrated, and it's called Put the Kettle On, and that's going to be out in November. And that's me allowing my funny, slightly snarky side. So it's factual in some ways, but it's kind of it's got some phrases, and it's got lots of swear words in it. So.
Awesome.
So yeah, and yeah, connect with me. Most of my kind of handles are Trish Taylor Author. Instagram, it's Trish Taylor Author. So yeah, just come and connect with me. I'd love to hear what people think and how they're dealing with their imposter syndrome.
Cool.
And remember, everyone's awesome. We're all finding our own way. Don't compare yourself to others unless you want to just learn something from it, because you've all got your little place in the world, and it's not the same as anybody else's. And there's people out there who want what you've got to offer. So just go out and create something. Thank you so much, Trish. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this very unique episode featuring Trish Taylor. I'm going to include some links in the description, along with her Amazon page to purchase her book if you want a copy of it yourself, and Trish's website, TrishTaylorAuthor.com, along with her YouTube channel where you can get some of the practices of her different lessons. And we have the 28-day plan so you can start implementing your strategy to overcome imposter syndrome. And as an added bonus, there is a free NLP book available for you to check out as well. Just an FYI, Trish has been writing lots of other books, including titles like Am I Scared? Face Your Fears and Learn to Let Them Go. I'm Never Drinking Again, Maybe It's Time to Think About Your Drinking, ? And many, many others. So definitely get in touch with her and pick her brain and just learn all about overcoming imposter syndrome and building just a strong mental place to be. Cool, guys. I want to hear back and
know if this was something that resonated with you and if you'd like to see future episodes with other book authors. And if there's a particular book that served you in your self-help journey, definitely share it, and I'll try and get in touch with the author and have them on as a guest as well. Until next time, rock on.